Chaim Bracha. Chaim Bracha.
Thank you so much.
Fortunately, coming right now from the funeral of Gershon Friedman, Gershon Yechiel ben Yitzchak. He suddenly passed away this week. He was a very young man. He's 55 years old. And he was buried today in the 23rd of Tevis. There are a few people, very unique people, who were buried in the 23rd of Tevis. And you know that Chassidim, we have a custom not to say eulogies. But I think the earliest mention of this custom is about someone who passed away on the 23rd of Tevis. And this custom was written by a man whose name was Gershon. About the person who passed away was Yitzchak. So I just want to share a little bit of that story. The story of the Alter Rebbe. Tonight's Alter Rebbe's Hilula, and I think it's which is in sync with what we're going to discuss tonight. Tonight we're going to discuss the idea of Derish Tevis Ulasei, of seeking the welfare of others. It's a long story, and I shared it. If you want to hear the story, text me. I'll send you a link for the detailed version of the story. But very briefly, there was a chassid whose name was Rabbi Yitzchak Shol. He was an older man, and he, in his town, they whenever someone visited the Alter Rebbe, Mittler Rebbe, the person who came back would have to review and share the teachings, and everyone honored this person. Even if the guy came back and didn't know how to read, didn't know how to. They make the bracha of Amoitzi. When he came back from visiting the Rebbe, they'll make a big farbrengen. They will gather around them. So, what did you see by the Rebbe? What did you hear by the Rebbe? That's the kind of respect they had for each other. Anyways, so there was this chassid who later grew to become one of the most prominent chassidim of the Rebbe Rashab, of Geshem Pahar. He had visited the Rebbe Rashab, and he came back with a discourse, and he repeated it again and again, 3 or 4 or 5 times. And then that morning, on the 23rd of Tevis, this chassid Yitzchak Shol wakes up in the morning. The first thing he says is, "I'm going home for Yontif. Home for Yontif. Please bring all my friends." He said it in their names: Rabbi Yosef, Rabbi Shalom, Rabbi Yitzchak. Bring them all to the home right now, because I'm going home for Yontif. And he had no idea. His grandson, Reb Dovber, didn't know what he was talking about. He brought Reb Dovber, he brought his friends, he brought this young man who had just returned from the city of Lubavitch, and who had repeated this discourse several times, verbatim, from memory. They come to the home, and they're sitting together, and he wasn't well, and they thought that he maybe became insane, maybe became senile. They thought that he's going home for Yontif. It's 23rd of Tevis. Why Yontif is around 23rd of Tevis? What is he referring to? But he says, brothers, I'm going home for Yontif. And one chassid, older chassid, said, "You think you're going to make it there for Yontif?" He says, "Yes." He says, "Yes, we need to hurry because I need to go home for Yontif." What happened was, that 72 years before, this man and the Yitzchak Shol were by the Alter Rebbe. And by the Alter Rebbe, they heard a teaching. So Yitzchak Shol, he was very, very weak. He said, "I want to share with you something that we both heard together from the Alter Rebbe. You remember?" It was like as if it was yesterday. 72 years had passed. Can I share with you something we heard from the Alter Rebbe? Because it was time to daven mincha, and the Alter Rebbe said something about mincha. Let me share with you what the Alter Rebbe said about mincha. And he put on his hat, he put on his jacket and gartel. He wanted to stand up, but he was too weak to stand up. And instead of standing up, his face was very pale. With all the exertion, there was some red blotches on his face. And he said, the Alter Rebbe said, a person should always be scrupulous about the prayer of mincha. Very careful, Zahir. And the Alter Rebbe explains that the word careful has the same letters as the word for light. And the Alter Rebbe said that what makes a person shine? What's the role of a person in this world? The role of a person in this world is to daven mincha. That's how a person shines. What does mincha mean? Mincha is a time when we're very busy, we're involved in the most earthiest things, the lowest, we're involved. We're busy. A person breaks away and he davens mincha, that's how his light shines. So it's not only talking about mincha, it's talking about the theme of mincha, which is to bring spirituality in the most mundane things in our life, to connect to Hashem no matter what's going on. That's the teaching that Yitzchak Shol shared, and then they proceeded to daven mincha. And and he said before they started mincha, he said, brothers, please do not eulogize me. Please do not delay the burial. I'm hoping that I can go through the Nar Dinar, the river of fire that souls go to before going into Gan Eden. I want to hope to go through this and be done and be able to be home for Yontif, because tonight is the anniversary of the passing of the Alter Rebbe, and I want to be by the Alter Rebbe in Gan Eden, in heaven, and we with Alter Rebbe on the day of his Yontif, the day of his anniversary of his passing in Gan Eden. They proceeded to daven mincha together. At the end of mincha, Yitzchak Shol called out with a very loud, clear voice, Shema Yisrael, Hashem Elokeinu, Hashem Echad. And with that, he gave his neshama to Hashem, and all the other chassidim, they said the various verses you say when someone passes away. Before they pass away, Baruch Shem Kvei Malchus Elon Vad, Baruch Shem Kvei Malchus Elon Vad, Baruch Shem Kvei Malchus Elon Vad, and Hashem Hu Elikim, Hashem Hu Elikim, Shana Abba B'Yushalayim. The various verses we say at the end of Yom Kippur, you also say, Chas Shalom, person about to pass away, they say these verses as well. The chassidim said those verses, and then the elder chassidim said, we have to hurry, we have to rush, because it was very icy, and it was very late, and he wants to be home. We have to honor his last request. They went together to the cemetery, and they broke the ice, and they managed to bury him before sundown. And his grandson said Kaddish, as halacha says. But not only his grandson said Kaddish, all of his friends also said Kaddish. And Reb Gershon, I forgot to mention, he said to Gershon, I'm going to mention to your father how I've seen you and how much you should have pleasure from you, because you're going in a good way. Because Reb Gershon was the one who repeated these teachings that he had heard in the city of Lubavitch, and he remembered from memory, and he repeated them again and again, and the Yitzchak Shol really appreciated it. So when he repeated the teachings again and again, like 5-6 times, the Maimer, he said, I'm going to tell your father that you're going in a good way. I'm going to give regards to your father. Anyways, they finished burying him. Reb Dov Ber, his grandson, says Kaddish, but not only him, all of his friends say Kaddish. And Reb Gershon says, I saw when they were saying Kaddish that they were envious of him. They were jealous of him. They were jealous because he gets to be with the Alter Rebbe, and I could sense in them that there's this envy that they had, that he is with the Alter Rebbe, he is home for Yontif. So Reb Gershon Yechiel ben Yitzchak, he just went today home for Yontif, and I'm sure he's with the Alter Rebbe here in chassidus, the Alter Rebbe, the Middle Rebbe, all the Rebbeim. And Iker is we shouldn't leave him Gan Eden, Chas Shalom. But they have an anniversary of passing that tzaddik. It says Pelu Shus Kedavar. It's called salvation in this world, in the lowest parts of the world, in the things which you think like it's the last place you'd expect to see a miracle. It's something which seems so distant. But Bekedavar, it's like in Egypt. But the words Bekedavar, it's actually referred to Egypt, the lowest abomination of the world, a place you wouldn't expect to see Hashem's miracles. But when the tzaddik passes away, Hashem reaches such a place that causes salvation, the lowest of places. L'chaim, l'chaim, we should see that the nitzach and the victory of our soldiers, of Am Yisrael. Take from Yam Mamish, l'chaim.
They just whacked the head of Hamas.
Mamish?
Yesterday or today?
Today.
Mamish, mazel tov.
They killed the head of Hamas in Beirut.
Yesterday? This is yesterday.
That's it's gonna have news.
This is yesterday.
Baruch is a kohen. He has a prediction. Okay, so this week, it's all on our minds. What Baruch is talking was on our minds, and it's something which is going on and on and on, and it's easy to ask the question, what's going to happen? And something we all think about. Rabbi Shaul Meir Lau was in an audience with the Rebbe once after the Yom Kippur War, and the Rebbe asked him what the mood is like in Israel. And he told the Rebbe, everyone is wondering what's going to be. So the Rebbe said, when I heard the story, Jews don't ask what's going to be. It's the kind of question Jews are supposed to ask. Jews ask, what do I need to do? That's a question a Jew asks. So that's what our focus has to be today on the Elul of the Alter Rebbe. Our focus has to be, what are we supposed to connect with today? So let's look in this week's Torah portion. We read the story of Moshe Rabbeinu. Moshe Rabbeinu was born, Moses was born, and the Pharaoh makes this decree that every Jewish boy who is born has to be thrown in the Nile River. And his mother holds on to him for as long as she can, but eventually she puts him into the Nile River. And when she puts him in the Nile River, as we all know the story, the daughter of the Pharaoh goes out to bathe, she was actually wanted to immerse herself to become Jewish. She wanted to convert to Judaism, and she sees this baby in this basket in the river. She stretches out her hand. Miraculously, her hand goes a lot further than her hand could possibly go. She rescues Moshe Rabbeinu. But here, something happens. Moshe Rabbeinu doesn't want to nurse from any of the Egyptian nursemaids. Why? Talmud says because Moshe Rabbeinu, because Moses was going to speak to God, therefore his holy mouth couldn't do that. And therefore, instead, his mother, Yocheved, his sister Miriam said he must be a Jewish baby, he needs to go to the Jewish people. So for 3 years, Moshe Rabbeinu was raised by his mother. As the Torah says, he was raised, and after he was raised, he went back to the house of the Pharaoh. The Talmud says that when he went back to the house of the Pharaoh, he was like all the other princes of Egypt. He wore the royal garments, and he was raised in Pharaoh's house for 15 years. It's very ironic. Think about it. He's trying to find the one who the astrologers have predicted will be the one that will redeem the Jewish people, and therefore he wants to kill every Jewish baby. And where is the baby? The baby is in his house, growing in his house, as one of his princes. This really brings out the idea how people think a lot, and what Hashem's plan is what happens. Anyways, after Moshe Rabbeinu was raised in the Pharaoh's house for 15 years, so he's already 18 years old, he goes out, the Torah says, he goes out to his brothers. He senses that these are his brothers, even though he is in the lap of luxury, and he is with all the other Egyptian princes, and yet he sees the Jewish people suffering. Vayetze, Torah says he went out. He wasn't just satisfied being in the palace and having all the luxury that he had. Vayetze, he completely disregarded all that, and he went out into his people to feel where they were, seeing their suffering. And the Torah says, what did he see? Vayar b'sivleisam. He paid attention. He saw, he put his eyes and his heart to see their pain. The meaning of their pain, sivleisam, doesn't just mean the pain they were having now. Sivleisam also means all of the baggage that everyone has in the past, that tzaddik, the Moshe Rabbeinu, leader of the Jewish people, doesn't just see what they're carrying now, he sees also where they're coming from. The tzaddik of Yerushalayim, Bar 11, he used to be working in a yeshiva called Eitz Chaim. And he was in this yeshiva of Eitz Chaim, he was together with another fellow colleague of the administration, and he's staring at kids by recess time. And this other guy says, what are you staring at? He says, come, I'll show you. Let's look together. They look together, and maybe he wants to go with you. Maybe ask him. I don't know. Even kan komen met hem om brengen die essen. To essen, kosher. Met de kei.
It's going to take 20 minutes minimum.
Whatever you want.
Well, it's really the call of the people here.
It's up to you. Want to stay, you could stay. Want to go, you could go. It's up to you. Okay, so
You tell me.
go. Ask for the Hebrew class. The Hebrew class.
Okay, let's go.
All right. So okay. So what happens is that they're at recess, and Bar 11 says, "You see? Did you see?" And the guy's like, "Yeah. What did you see?" Okay. So what did you see? He said, "I saw one kid who sits aren't kosher. I saw another kid come late to recess, come late back from recess back to class, and I saw another kid he played baseball and he ran without wearing a yarmulke. He wasn't wearing his head cover." So what did you see? Asked Bar 11. Bar 11 said, "I saw that this boy Shmuel, his eyes look a little down. I'm thinking I should call his parents and see what's bothering him." And they saw the same thing. One is looking externally, what they actually are doing. By 11, wasn't just looking at what's happening externally, he's looking what's going on in these kids, what's bothering them. This guy looks a little sad, he's sunken, maybe he's hungry. Well, what's going on with this kid? Moshe Rabbeinu also, he doesn't just see their present state, he sees also their past. He sees where they're coming from. And he sees two Jews fighting. And what does Moshe say when he sees the two Jews fighting?
Sorry, I didn't understand. What was I apologize.
The point of the story was, that just like Moshe Levin, it says he saw their pain. It wasn't just their pain; he saw what they were carrying, the baggage they were carrying. So to Bar 11, in this story, He doesn't just see the boy's tzitzis are puzzle. The boy who comes late back from recess, he's playing without a yarmulke. He sees what's bothering this guy. This child, he's have to call the parents. This kid looks a little bit sad. Something's going on with this child. So Moshe sees these two people fighting, and they say to Moshe Rabbeinu, "Do you want to kill us? Or you kill the Egyptian?" And what does Moshe Rabbeinu respond? Moshe Rabbeinu says, "Achin neida hadavar." Now I know why it's happened. I know why the Jewish people are in exile. It's a funny thing to say. Moshe said, "I was wondering why the Jewish people suffer more than any other nation, and now I discovered the reason." Why is it a funny thing to say? This was at a time when most of the Jewish people serving idols. They forgot what their parents and grandparents were doing, and they got involved in idol worship. So if you wanted to look at something wrong in the Jewish people, there's a lot bigger things in Lashon Hara. Moshe Rabbeinu said, they're speaking bad about me, then that's why we're in exile. What do you mean they're speaking bad about you? These people are praying to all these idols. They're doing the most un-Jewish thing. What does it mean that Moshe Rabbeinu says, now I know, as if he didn't know before. Now, what was so unique about speaking bad about Moshe Rabbeinu, and why is that the thing that keeps the Jewish people in exile? What does that mean? To understand this, we have to first explain something else. It says the Jewish people we were born as a people when we left Egypt. Why were we born as a people when we left Egypt? We come from Avram Avinu. Avram Avinu was the first one to believe in Hashem. So we all believers, children of believers from Avram Avinu. We were a people before. We all believed in Hashem. We were all connected to Jewish people before. Why are we saying uniquely that we became a people when we left Egypt? It says in the prophet of Ezekiel, Yechezkel says, we left Egypt and we became a people. What changed? Well, the answer is like this. Before we left Egypt, when we were in Egypt, why were we Jewish? What made us Jewish? What was unique about Jewish people? They believed in Hashem. Believers. Our belief made us a people. But if we stopped believing, if we weren't interested in Judaism, weren't interested in what Avram Avinu taught us, then we opted out. We were to opt out and not be part of this people. We were to not be connected to it. And that's what happened. Many Jews, when they left Egypt, didn't go with the Jewish people. They were to opt out. And many Jews died. And they didn't go with the Jewish people. What happened after we left Egypt?
Was most of that a refusal, or were some of them not allowed to go?
They weren't allowed to go because they wanted to remain servants of the Pharaoh, and they didn't want to be servants of Hashem. So, although... You ready to go?
Yeah, go.
Okay, great. Although every one of us is a child of Hashem, but it's possible for a child to say, I'm not your child. A child could say to his father, I'm not your child. He could hide the bond he has with his father. And so the Jews who said, we're servants of the Pharaoh, we don't want to go with Moses, they covered and concealed their bond with Hashem, and they didn't merit to go out. They weren't able to go out because of that. However, what happened after we left Egypt is that God chose the Jewish people. He made us into a people, not because of our belief in Hashem, and we were able to hide it or reveal it or not. Something else happened. God chose us to become His people. What happens? Why were we His people? Not because of what we were doing, what we were thinking, what we were feeling. We were chosen by Hashem to be His people. So two things changed. Number one, you can no longer opt out. You can no longer hide your Jewishness. Because you're Jewish not because of you're Jewish because He chose you to be Jewish. And number two, there's no longer a bunch of individuals who are associated individually and personally with this belief that they got from Abraham. No, now we're all one people, one entity. We're no longer separate entities. And that's why the big thing is Lashon Hara. That's why the big problem was speaking negatively about each other. Why? Because why is Hashem taking us out of Egypt? Because we are one people, we're one entity. So when a Jew speaks negatively about another Jew, what happens is he's separating himself from another Jew, and he is going against the whole idea of our Jewishness, which is now, after Hashem took us out of Egypt, His choice. Hashem chose us to become His people. So there was this guy. Do they still have AskMoses.com? That still exists? There was someone once asked.
Ask the rabbi.
There was a guy who asked this question, asked Moses a few years ago. Crazy story. The guy says this, a true story. He says, listen, I married someone Christian, I converted to Christianity, I sent my children to Christian schools, but I still feel that I'm Jewish. What could I do to abolish and divorce myself from the Jewish people? He writes this to a rabbi. So the rabbi says to him, look at this. You did everything you could possibly to get rid of your Jewishness. And yet, it's so on your mind, although you have this, you're a busy person and you have a family and you have all these things going on, the number one thing that concerns you is your Jewishness. It tells you a lot about who you are. So the Jewishness is not something that that you could ignore because it's the overarching part of who you are. So, bottom line is, when the Jewish people are speaking negatively about each other, what happens? Torah says that King David had soldiers who were perfectly righteous. King Achav had soldiers who served idols. But King David's soldiers, when they went out to war, not everyone came back. When King Achav's soldiers went out to war, the idol worshippers, they all came back alive. Why was the difference? King Achav's soldiers all got along with each other. King Achav's soldiers, they all were together. When a Jew is united with another Jew, there's a protection of Hashem. The Cashapp Sefer says that the nations of the world that consents, shalom, there's discord by the Jewish people, and shalom, they attack because they sense the weakness. What's the weakness caused by? They sense our discord. We don't sense ourselves necessarily discord, but the enemies, Jewish people, feel that there's silent resentment or whatever it is, or more than silent resentment. Sometimes silent resentment is worse than the overt resentment. And the resentment that we have for each other, chas shalom, that takes away the protection. Tomorrow night on Ma'ariv, we say in our prayers, spread over us the sukkah of your protection. What does that mean? Just ask Hashem to protect us. Spread over us the sukkah of your protection. When we're together and we're one, we have Hashem. We're able to have that sukkah of protection. That's the key thing here. So when the Jewish people are speaking negatively about each other, Mishra says, now I know. Hashem is not taking us out of Egypt because of our belief in Hashem. He's taking us out because we're His people. And when we speak negatively about each other, we're no longer one. And what does Moshe Rabbeinu do? Moshe Rabbeinu works in the Jewish people. Moshe Rabbeinu works in the Jewish people, and he gets them to get along with each other. He gets them to stop speaking about each other. And by doing this, the Jewish people are now able to lead Egypt. By him taking away the things that separate, and this is what we see in the world happening today, that the Jewish people, there's a kind of unity, the kind of identity that Jews never had before about their Jewishness. We look at each other now in a different way we did before, and it's growing. It's no longer fashionable to have these silent resentment things for each other in shul. It's no longer fashionable. Why isn't it fashionable? Because you see these Jews in Israel who are at each other's necks for decades. All of a sudden they're getting along. All of a sudden they're pushing aside their differences. We are in America. If we don't get along with each other, it's a begida. It's a treachery to the soldiers. The Jewish people getting along with each other brings protection to all of Am Yisrael. If we get along with each other and we overlook our differences, we're bringing protection. I'm not saying Chas Hashem a reason for anything. God forbid. There's no reason for us to be in exile for a second. The time of redemption has long arrived. But one thing we have to know is that we could add to Hashem's blessing and protection through doing good things. And number one thing we have to work on is Deiresh Tevis Los, not just not to be in a state of silent resentment, but to actively seek the welfare of another Jew, to actively reach out and to think about another Jew and to be connect with them. Just like we left Egypt, it was in the schus and the merit of us getting rid of the lashon hara, getting rid of the negative things saying about each other, and becoming one people. This is what brings out our majesty and our greatness and our victory. So tonight, as I mentioned before, the story of the Alter Rebbe, in this town, they all respected each other. They all got along with each other. They all listened to each other. We could do this. We could just, I want to show one thing. Last week we did a charity campaign. One guy donates a charity campaign, and he writes, you know why I donated, Rabbi Levin? I donated because you always smile at me. I was shocked. Why was I shocked? I never smile at him. He smiles at me, I smile back. He smiles at me, I smile back. That's why, so he always thought I smiled at him. I smiled at him because he smiled at me. This is how we bring Mashiach, my friends. To smile at each other. Let's try. Let's do it. It's okay. Look at each other and smile. Look at it. Smile. There was a true story. There was a group of teachers. They did a seminar for these teachers, and there's some delay in the seminar or whatever. They told the teachers, okay, now everyone just dance. Everyone just dance together. What happened? All of a sudden, everyone's very happy. Everyone's very happy. It was such an external, tiny little thing. All of a sudden, everyone got rid of it. When you dance with someone, what happens? You want to hug the person, but it's embarrassing to hug them. So you dance, you let go, and this is this Indian smiling at each other. Looking, Mashiach comes. What's going to happen? I don't know if the shul is going to be immediately transported to Yerushalayim within a second. I think that's how it works. Well, let's say it's not how it works. Let's say it works. It gets delayed. We feel ourselves in the air, right? Let's say we see the shul rising, and you're wondering if it's an earthquake. But as the shul gets higher and higher above the ground, you no longer think it's an earthquake. As you see, like the San Bernardino Valley, you're like, okay, this is not an earthquake. This is something else, right? Mashiach is actually coming. You hear the shofar, and you're Jewish, you're skeptical. But as you go above the San Bernardino Valley, you go over the Pacific. Unless we go the other way, probably the Pacific. So then, because it's closer, right? Anyway, so as Mashiach is coming, what's going to happen to us in the shul as we're in the clouds are carrying us? You know what's going to happen? We're all going to smile at each other. We're all going to smile at each other. We're all going to be happy with each other. Let's start. Let's start now. Let's start, and we're going to see the shul's going to rise up. We smile at each other. The shul's going to rise and go to Yerushalayim. L'chaim, l'chaim v'racha. Shiach now, l'chaim v'racha.